Hi, it's Martin here. I'm just going to show you some of the features of WP GoToWebinar, a free plugin for WordPress which enables you to show upcoming webinars to website visitors and allow them to register for a webinar on your website. Once the plugin is authenticated in the plugin settings, all you need to do is go to any post or page and enter in the shortcode GoToWebinar as shown on this page here. And then once you've saved the page, and go to your website, you'll see a table which displays all your upcoming webinars, which includes the title, the date of the webinar, the start time, the duration, and also a link to register for the webinar. And that link can be to on the GoToWebinar website, or it can also be on your website. Also, you'll see this little information icon here. If I click on that, it will also display a description of the webinar as well. Another way to display upcoming webinars is using the new calendar display. And all you need to do for that is insert the shortcode GoToWebinar-calendar and then update the page. And what that will look like is a calendar which will display all your upcoming webinars for the various days. You can view it as a month view, you can go to a week view, a daily view, or a list view. And you can change the dates by scrolling backwards and forwards like that. You can also click the Today button and that will go to today's date as well. If you click on a webinar event, it will go to the registration page as well. You can also put in additional parameters in the shortcode, and these parameters work for both the standard GoToWebinar shortcode and also the GoToWebinar calendar shortcode as well. So what you can do here is with the time zone parameter, you can enter in a time zone like Australia Brisbane or Australia Sydney, and it will only display webinars that are from that particular time zone. The time zone is specified in GoToWebinar itself when you create the webinar. We've also got two parameters here, one called include and one called exclude. So you can include webinars that only contain the word audit in the title, or exclude webinars that have got private in the title, and obviously you can turn those words into whatever is applicable for you. And you can also hide particular words from displaying in the webinar title. So these parameters, these three parameters here can be used to essentially create categories of webinars, so you can show particular webinars on certain parts of your website. So you may have training webinars, or you may have sales webinars, and you may want to show them in different parts of your site. So you can use those three parameters there to kind of show particular webinars to different people. You've also got the last parameter here called days, and that will show webinars in the next 20 days in this example, or I could say 30 days. And then you can update the page from there. And what that looks like is a much shorter table, only displaying webinars that meet your criteria. As well as displaying upcoming webinars on any post or page using the shortcode method, you can also insert upcoming webinars via a widget on your website. So you'll see the GoToWebinar widget item, and you can just drag and drop this into any sidebar on your website. It works very similarly to the shortcode. You can give your widget a title. However, something new is you can specify how many webinars you actually want to display in the sidebar, and it includes the same include, exclude, hide, and time zone filters to show webinars that only meet a particular criteria. And if I click save here, on my live site, it will display webinars in your sidebar that meet that particular criteria. It displays the webinars in a slightly shortened view, so it gives you the title, the date and the time, and also a link to the registration page as well. So far I've shown you how to display upcoming webinars, but the other component of the plugin is displaying a registration form for a given webinar as well. So in the upcoming webinars display, you would have seen a whole bunch of registration links throughout the table or on the calendar. And when people click on these links, it can either go to a registration page on the GoToWebinar website, or it can go to a registration page on your particular website. And this is all dictated in the plugin options under this setting called Custom Registration Page. Here is where you'd select the page where you want the registration forms to be kind of hosted. And you've also got the option of selecting the Use GoToWebinar website here at the top. So I've just selected registration here at the moment, and you'll see on this registration page, I've created the shortcode GoToWebinar Reg, and then just click Update. So with the settings like that, if I'm now on my website and I'm looking at my various webinars, if I click on the register link, it'll now take me to a page which contains the registration form, which will just load up here. And it displays the name of the webinar, the date, the time, the duration, as well as the registration form. So visitors can go onto the site and register, and then click submit, and then they get sent a confirmation email, which is sent by GoToWebinar. You can also insert a registration form for a specific webinar as well. And to do that, you just need to enter in the shortcode GoToWebinar-reg and then enter the key as a parameter. And the webinar key can be taken from the GoToWebinar website, or you can also find various keys of the webinar in the plugin settings. So if you go to the plugin settings and go to the FAQ tab, and then you go to this question here, you'll see a listing of all your webinars and the various webinar keys. So you can just copy that in and put that into the shortcode. Another far easier way to do it is using Visual Composer, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But once I've clicked Update to that page there, it will now display a registration form just for that particular webinar. So that can be really handy for blog posts or pages or any promotional kind of one-off items. You can also display a registration form for the next upcoming webinar as well. And to do that, you actually use the exact same shortcode as before, the GoToWebinar-reg, and instead of putting the webinar key as a parameter, all you have to do is put in the keyword upcoming, and that will display a registration form for your next upcoming webinar. As well as that shortcode there, you can also put in a range of parameters as well. So if you want to show the next upcoming registration form from a webinar from a particular time zone, or whether the title includes a particular word or excludes a particular word, or you can also hide a word from the title as well. And once you've clicked Update, it will then display your most recent upcoming registration form for your webinar. So far I've referenced a whole bunch of different shortcodes which can be used to display upcoming webinars and also register for webinars using a registration form. Sometimes these shortcodes can be difficult to remember, so a really nice way of inserting these different elements on different post pages and custom post types is using Visual Composer, because the GoToWebinar plugin integrates well with Visual Composer. Visual Composer is a paid plugin which can be purchased from the Envato marketplace. And how it works is it gives you a visual interface for constructing post pages or custom post types. So what I can do is just click the little plus icon here, and you'll see that the plugin provides 4 GoToWebinar elements. The first one here is for displaying upcoming webinars, the main table view. This one here displays a calendar view, and this one here displays a registration form for a single webinar, or also the upcoming dynamic registration form as well. This shortcode here called WP GoToWebinar registration should be put on your registration page if you want to use your website to post the registration forms. And if I just click on one of the elements as an example, you'll see that it provides a far more visual, easier to understand way of constructing the different GoToWebinar elements. So I can put in text here to include, exclude, hide the following, show webinars from the next 20 days, let's say, and only display webinars from Australia, Brisbane. Then if I click Save Changes, it's then inserted that shortcode into the page, and then I can just click Update. While I'm here, I just want to give you a quick overview of the main settings of the plugin as well. The very first thing you should do once you've installed and activated the plugin is authorize the plugin with your GoToWebinar account. And once the plugin is authorized, all the various shortcodes and Visual Composer elements will actually function correctly. And to do that, all you need to do is click here to get the auth and key on this particular button here. And you'll go through an authorization process with your GoToWebinar account and populate your authorization and organize the key in these fields here. Once that's been populated, you should save all settings and then all the different shortcodes and elements will start working. Just below this, we've got different ways of displaying the date and the time, which can be handy if you want to change that. If you're like in America and your date and your day and the month is switched around. Also, you can disable GMT tooltips, and you can also change the colors of the tooltips as well. So what that's talking about is if I just go to my main upcoming webinar table and I hover my mouse over the date, you'll see that it displays a little pop-up which shows you what day of the week it is, which is pretty handy and nice little feature to have. And if you hover over the time of the webinar, it also displays what the time zone is in GMT time. So I'm in Australian Eastern Standard Time, and that's GMT 10. This webinar here, which is in British Standard Time, populates a GMT of 0. So in the plugin settings, if I disable that checkbox there, or click on that checkbox, it will disable those GMT tooltips from displaying. And as I just mentioned, you can change the color of those tooltips here. You can change the icon and link color of the main table. So I selected red, so these little icons here are red, and the registration link is also red there as well. I mentioned previously that if you want users to register for a webinar on your website, you can select the page here which has got the GoToWebinar red shortcode. When someone successfully registers for a webinar, you have a choice of displaying a custom thank you page. So once they successfully register, it redirects them to that thank you page, or you can use a default message. That's up to you what you want to do there. You can also change the color of the button, text color, background color, and border color. And you can also turn caching off. I recommend keeping this checkbox unchecked because what happens is every time someone goes to your upcoming webinar display table or registration form, it will do a call via the GoToWebinar API to display that information. And sometimes if you make too many calls to GoToWebinar, sometimes your API can be blocked or throttled, which means that if people visit your website later on in the day perhaps, the GoToWebinar information won't display correctly. So I recommend generally unchecking that checkbox. But if you are wondering why, for example, you created a new webinar in GoToWebinar, but it's not displaying in your upcoming webinar table, it can be because of caching. And to turn caching off, you need to go to the to clear the cache, you need to go to the Clear Cache tab and click the Clear Webinar Cache button. And what that will do is clear out the cache. So if you do add a new webinar and it's not showing, you just click that button, it should then show up in the table. Or, as I said, the other option is to just turn caching off, which is okay perhaps if you've got a small website and there's not too many people viewing your website. Another little feature is the enable time zone conversion link, which is, I think, is a generally pretty good feature which most people would want to use. And what that does is, if I go back to my webinar table, you'll see this little link here above the table saying convert to my time zone. If I click on this, it will detect that my time zone is Australia and Sydney, and what it will do is it will change the times and dates of all the webinars so they're in my local time zone. So this can be really handy if you're an international company and you've got customers all around the world, and you want them to know when your webinar is in their local time and date. So all they need to do is click that convert to my time zone, and all the dates and times in the table will convert to their local time. And this link also displays on the registration form as well. This one isn't a great example because the webinar is in my actual time, but if I once again click on that link, it will convert that date and time to my local time zone. You can also display a custom error message if the location of the user isn't detected correctly, and you can also insert a reCAPTCHA site key, which can be obtained by clicking that little link there. And what that does is put a little CAPTCHA little authorization before people can register for a webinar. So that can be handy to kind of fight against spam. In the translation tab, there's a whole variety of different options to override the fields displayed on the GoToWebinar registration form on your website. So instead of saying having a field called first name, you can put in custom text here and we'll override that value, which can be handy like if your primary language is German or French, you can put in the German or French text for first name there if you wanted to. You can also translate the submit button. You could call that send if you wanted to, like I've mentioned here. In the previous options tab, I mentioned there are two ways you can have a thank you page or a thank you message. You can use the default message, and you can also redirect them to a thank you page on your website, which can be good if you're doing like tracking through Google Analytics or something like that. But if you use the default message, you can define that custom message here. So you can also use these shortcodes to create a dynamic message as well. So I've just created a little message here saying, thanks first name for registering for my webinar. Please visit the webinar here. And it has a link to the registration URL. So I can insert these shortcodes here and it'll create this dynamic message. You can also create a custom message if they've already registered for the webinar. So I've created one here saying, hey first name, you've already registered for this webinar. You can also display a custom error message. So if they register for the webinar, but there's been some technical error, you can create a custom error message here. In GoToWebinar, you can also set a maximum amount of people that can attend a webinar. And if someone registers for a webinar but the maximum limit has been reached, it will display this custom message here as well. There's also, for example, if a webinar has been cancelled, you can add in custom content here, which will display instead of the webinar. So if you create a webinar and GoToWebinar, and you've cancelled it for some reason, but on your website you still have the shortcode which references that particular webinar, you can put custom text like perhaps you could say, sorry, this webinar is no longer available. And it'll display this custom message instead. You can also translate the required field message, which displays if someone submits a form but they haven't completed all the information. This is the error message that will display for those form fields. As I mentioned before, you can clear the webinar cache at any time by clicking this button here. And you'll also find in the FAQ tab a general summary of all the different features of the plugin. I do recommend checking out that documentation before you create a support request. But if you do want to create a support request, just go to the support tab and you can create a ticket on the WordPress forum. I also recommend that you input this kind of diagnostic information here, as that really helps me solve issues with the plugin a little bit easier.